Do you know how hard engineers work to straighten the Leaning Tower of Pisa? That's why it's been standing for over 800 years. But during the construction, the engineers made a fatal mistake. They only dug a foundation 3 meters deep. Due to the river flooding in the area, most of the ground is a soft layer of clay and sand. The construction of the bell tower began in 1173. When it reached the 3rd floor, it was stopped for war reasons. During this time, the bell tower slowly sank to one side under its own gravity. It was not until nearly a century after the work had stopped and they were ready to resume construction that the engineers realized the clock tower was tilting. But instead of knocking it down, they built it in the opposite direction of the Leaning Tower, in the shape of a banana, in an attempt to restore balance to the tower. But in 1278, when they reached the 7th floor, the work was interrupted by war. It wasn't until 1360 that construction began again. The engineers made a last-ditch effort. In the construction of the steps, 6 floors were built on the south side and 4 on the north side, in an attempt to add weight to the south side to restore the bell tower. But unfortunately, it didn't work. The clock tower was still tilted 1.6 degrees after the completion of the work. In 1934, it was found to have tilted 4.5 degrees. The local authorities began to intervene manually. First, a large pit was dug on the north side. 3 holes were drilled in the base of the bell tower, and a wooden box was attached to each. The boxes were filled with concrete. It was hoped that this would straighten out the Leaning Tower. Instead, the leaning angle of the tower increased by 0.5 degrees. By 1990, the tower had tilted 5.5 degrees. For safety reasons, the tower was closed to the public. Then, 600 tons of lead were placed on the north side. This succeeded in pulling the tower back about 1%. But it's very unsightly. In order to solve the problem permanently, the engineers tried a number of things. One of them was to inject liquid nitrogen into the ground to stabilize the soil and prevent it from tilting. It's a good idea, but it's backfired here. That's because the soil contains a lot of water. When it freezes and expands, it makes the tower tilt even more. After a lot of calculations and evaluations, the engineers finally came up with a solution, which is to dig out the soil on the north side of the tower and slowly straighten the tower by its own weight. To make sure that this would work, they carried out a simulation not far from the tower. After a few experiments, the building was successfully straightened. The next step was to start construction. To ensure safety, a number of steel cables were installed on the Leaning Tower and pulled tightly by counterweights. At the first construction, only 1 meter of the foundation was dug. Over the course of a few months, the angle of the tower was restored. So over the next few months, workers dug a total of 380,000 cubic meters of soil out of the ground and managed to pull the Leaning Tower back to a safe angle. It's actually possible to straighten the tower completely, but a straight leaning tower would be pointless to visit. That's why the Leaning Tower of Pisa is still leaning at a certain angle.